I thought it would be helpful just to kind of go over if you happen to question your results, especially being that we get different kits that are sent into us, and you may get a bad batch. I mean, it happens often where we'll get a bad batch because maybe it was in extreme temperatures or whatnot. And this is a quick way that you can kind of figure out if you have a bad batch, or if maybe there was some user error on your end, or if it's a legitimate issue that you should address or not. And so just a couple of things to note just for perspective, that we're doing point of care testing. And point of care testing, no matter what kind of point of care testing, whether you're doing any type of lab that's point of care, it's not the most accurate. It's just a good snapshot for us. But you can't really base management off of point of care, because it's just not accurate. It's not the most accurate. And then also self-monitoring of blood glucose, which is basically what the patient does. They check their own blood sugar at home with their glucometer. That as well, you would be surprised that the regulation of glucometers is not very high, and the standards actually have some links and different references for it, but the bar is not set very high for these glucometers. And really, they're within standard if it's plus or minus 20, within 20 points. It's considered accurate, but if you think about that, 20 whole points on a glucometer, that's a big jump. But that's really what the glucometers, that's really what they're held to, and so I will say, refer to the standards of care, because it gives you a little bit more in depth of like what that standard is. But one of the big things I do want to say is that when these glucometers are approved, they're only held to the standard that they were approved for, and that may not be the current standard. Surprise, surprise. And so it's kind of bad, but that's really, so we don't know what kind of glucometers our patients have. So again, that's why this stuff is not very accurate, and we really have to do the education to get the patients into the home and to really explain to them why monitoring is such an important thing when it comes to diabetes self-management education. And so whatever we get into the home, like whatever result we get, just know that, like, even if you do get let's say you get like a 7.2, right? And this patient says they don't have any history of diabetes. Well, you still have to confirm that, okay? And that is outlined by the standards of care. Now, taking into account that we're doing point of care testing, it could be a false reading. But regardless, even if this was in a lab, we still, per the standards, and I believe it's section 6, which is glycemic targets, it says that everything has to be confirmed by a second test. So all the more reason why we need to be really educating our patients to be following up with their providers. Something else to keep in mind is that there are other conditions that can affect the A1c. So clearly it's the hemoglobin A1c. And so anything that affects the hemoglobin will affect this lab. So things like pregnancy, which, I mean, we're not going to see pregnant patients. I've never seen one in this role, but patients that are on HIV medications, anemia, people who have had recent blood loss, people who have had recent transfusions, and something that can be overlooked, those who have sickle cell. I had a patient the other day that had sickle cell disease, and she had like a 6.7. And just looking at the history of her and what was going on with her, chances are that was a low reading for her. All the more reason why, their education was happening to get in there, and also wanting to look at her own record. And so that brings me to my next point here. Here is a quick way, and this is in the standards of care. Like I said, section 6, but this gives you the estimated average glucose. So there are many different charts out here that kind of are a little bit more robust than this one, but this is from the standards. And if you note here, if you look at this A1c, this second column here gives you an average of what the blood sugar readings would be. Okay, so if a person is at a 7, on average, they should be hitting anywhere between 123 to 185, with an average of 154. Okay. And a quick thing that I like to do is if they are taking their blood sugars regularly and they have a glucometer, well, it already gives us an average. So I'll go back 3 months, 90 days back. You can even do it a month back and be able to like gauge from there. But if you get an A1c that you're starting to question and you're kind of like, I don't think this is right, well, this is why it's important for us to review their own records as well. I like to look at their actual glucometer because, I mean, the numbers are the numbers, but, and of course, it gives us the average. But this is a good place to educate for patients who are not monitoring their blood sugar. And technically, if they are a non-insulin type 2, they really don't have to. It's really not a huge benefit for them to monitor their blood sugar every day. That's again outlined by the standards. And Medicare, I want to say, covers about only 100 strips a month for non-insulin type 2s. Now, type 1s are different, and those who are on insulin, that's a whole nother conversation. But if patients are checking their blood sugar every day or they're checking it every so often, that should suffice enough, right? And so this is the very brief table that is actually in the standards of care, but I also want to show you a more robust chart right here. And I actually like this one because it literally, if you look up here, it takes you from an A1c of 4 all the way down to 13.9. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think that our point of care doesn't even register past 13, I don't believe. And so this right here tells us what our average glucose would be. So a couple of things I want to note, and if you want to just like keep this for your own records, I mean, you can Google estimated conversion, blood A1c conversion. And there are many charts that pop up. This is just one of many, and I've compared many of them. They're all pretty much the same. But something that I do want to point out, if by chance you don't have this with you and you're trying to figure it out in your head, the one thing that I would say is memorize 7. 7 is 154. And then you can figure out everything else. So let's look going up and down. You can see it goes from 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on and such. Well, for every 1%, give yourself about 29 to 30 points, give or take. So if you're going up to 8, add about 29 to 30. And if you do the math, well, it does that for you. Okay. You add 29 and that gives you 183. And if you want to go through and do it some more, sometimes it's about 30, but it's about 29 points. So every 1% that you go up or down, you add or subtract 29 points. So that right there gives you the whole number. But for every 0.1 or every 10th of a point, add 3 points. So let's just come up here. 7 even is 154. But 7.1 is 157, then 160, then 163. You see, you're adding 3 each time, about 3 each time. And I mean, like right here, there's 2, but you get what I'm saying. This is an average. It's an estimated average, but you'll be able to get an accurate sense. But again, if you don't have if the patient is not taking their blood sugars regularly, well, there's really not much that you can do. You just have your A1c that you got. But if on chance that they do have it and you're wondering, okay, I'm getting 4.7, 5.7 a line, and this patient, it doesn't seem like this would correlate with them. This is just a quick way that you can go about figuring it out for yourselves and being able to troubleshoot if it's a bad box that you got, or if maybe, sometimes, we can overfill the little tube. Sometimes, we don't let the finger dry all the way and some alcohol can there's many different things that could happen. But this is just a good way and just a good tidbit thing that I have utilized a lot since I've been doing our job. And so I hope this was beneficial for you all.